Understanding Harold Pinter. The secret to understanding Harold Pinter's plays. You might think that this is not a particularly serious film, since it more or less starts off with a bunny in the window. But the secret to Pinter's plays also explains some of the difficulties that a lot of people have with Shakespeare. Before we go up to the room with the bunny in it, I might as well remind those of you who don't know that Harold passed away 5 years ago, and Harold Pinter had 29 major plays produced, all of them massive successes, most if not all of them produced many, many times afterwards. And I think it's fair to say that while other writers may hanker after Emmys and Tonys and Oscars, Harold Pinter won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and writers like Arthur Miller and Becket and Mamet have spoken of Pinter being the greatest influence on playwrights in the 20th century. So what the bloody hell are his plays about? Well, I'm going to tell you. Let's get the bunny safe first of all. And Pinter's plays, here we are. And if this room looks slightly strange, I'm absolutely not trying to be strange in any sort of a way like Harold Pinter is for some people. Some people actually seem to brag about not understanding Harold Pinter, as though it was rather clever to say so, and I think I used to be one of those people, and as if he were really pulling some joke on everyone and his plays were about nothing at all. And I am anxious that you shouldn't think that this room is deliberately strange. It does have a few odd things about it. There are funny words or notices on the wall, and his plays. Harold Pinter didn't help people understand his plays by the fact that when anyone asked him what his plays were about, he always answered there, whatever you want them to be about. They mean whatever you want them to mean. And that, of course, resulted in a lot of people thinking that they meant nothing at all. And then, in 1982, he wrote a play which has the secret to it all. And the play is called A Kind of Alaska. And unusually for Harold, he actually said something about the play in the programme and in the printed edition of the play. And it's here. It says that this play was inspired by Awakenings by Oliver Sacks, MD. Now, Awakenings is a book about an epidemic which took place over most of the world in 1916. And like a lot of epidemics and viruses, it's disappeared now, apart from one extremely rare kind of Parkinson's, which is similar to it. But anyway, it's this epidemic which Harold said inspired him to write this play. Let's hear, first of all, what is this epidemic about? In 1916, this epidemic shook the world. Hundreds of people all over the world suffered from it, and it was a very peculiar virus which just made people paralysed, and they froze into comas for days, sometimes in a standing position. Very, very weird. And some of them didn't awake from their coma for weeks, and some not for months. And a very small number of people in London and America, anyway, didn't awake from their comas and stayed in them for years and years and years, looked after and forgotten largely in hospitals and fed intravenously because their insides worked, but apparently effectively dead. And the extraordinary thing is that 50 years later, a drug which was being tested to see if it might help people with Parkinson's was tested on these people, and to everyone's astonishment, they woke up. There is film of these people waking after 50 years. And it is quite extraordinary. Harold Pinter saw these films. It's this which inspired him to write this play. And De Niro and Robert Williams made a film in 1982 called Awakenings about the same thing. But that was about the doctors, and Harold was struck by the patients. And anyway, What's extraordinary is that when these people awoke after 50 years, they all thought that they had just been asleep for a few hours. They thought they were still the age they'd been 50 years ago, and only when they were shown reflections of themselves in mirrors did they realise that they had indeed been in a coma for 50 years. And after a few days, a few hours in some cases, they were able to speak and move about, and then later on they went back into their comas and all eventually died. So that's the epidemic. In this play, A Kind of Alaska, there's a woman called Deborah who's waking up after having been in a coma for 29 years, and there are only two other people in the play, a doctor and her sister. And she doesn't believe she's been asleep for so long, and she's shown a mirror, she realises it's true. Now, the doctor is the same doctor who's not just given her the drug which has woken her up, but the same doctor who attended her when she first fell into her coma 29 years before. It's not explained or discussed that this might be odd, that he's obsessive about her, or it's a coincidence, or whatever. And another thing is the fact that during this 29 years, at some point, the doctor has married her sister. Now, that may not be odd, it may be odd, but there's no explanation, no discussion of it. But whatever the relationship between the sister and the doctor is, and the set is a little odd as well, because Pinter makes it very clear that he wants just a bed, no other medical equipment, there's a window and a table with two chairs. I'm not sure there's even a door. So it's very, very simple. But. He said he was inspired to write the play by the epidemic, but the epidemic happened in 1916. No one awoke for 50 years. Deborah couldn't possibly be a victim of that, and the doctor couldn't possibly be the same doctor who visited her 50 years ago, unless he's 85 now or something. So what's Pinter doing? Well, seems fairly straightforward, really. He's writing a play about someone like the people who were victims of the epidemic. And he wants this person to be middle-aged, so he's made it 29 years she's been in a coma. But. The opening line of the play has the doctor saying to her, oh no, the opening line of the play is Deborah's. The second line is the doctor's, and he says, "Do you know me?" Now, given that she's been asleep for 29 years, we might expect her not to remember him, or if she does, because she thinks she's only been asleep 2 hours, that might be interesting. Maybe he knows that. So when he says, "Do you know me?" he's wanting to realise if, my God, she might instantly recognise me and all of that stuff, I suppose, except that, well, the audience doesn't know that. They don't know she's been asleep for 29 years. So when he says to her, "Do you know me?" they can't possibly guess, unless they've read the play already, that he's speaking to her this way because she's been in a coma for 29 years. It's going to look as though he's saying, I don't know, what's it going to look like? As though he's saying, "Do you know me? Do you remember me? Are you the love of my life that I haven't seen?" It's going to sound as though it means something, but it's not explained for some time. And by then, the opening line's been forgotten. It is odd, and I want to just digress briefly into Shakespeare because this film is largely about things that we find difficult in some plays. I don't mean just doing a Chinese accent or something if you're French. I mean that the thing of plays by Becket and some Albay and some Mamet and a lot of, if not all of Pinter, just seem very strange. And I want to clarify what different kinds of strangenesses there are in other plays so that we know what we're talking about. Shakespeare, now. Now, strange moments in Shakespeare. For example, in Hamlet, Gertrude has a speech describing Ophelia's suicide, and it's 22 lines long. She's obviously describing the suicide in some detail of how Ophelia drowned, and so she was there for some time, but she doesn't talk about having made any kind of an effort to stop the suicide or to save the girl. If she was there that long, why didn't she? Now, most actors won't really think about that, even if they realise that it's a question to be asked. They'll just get on and do what's there. But there are lots of other moments in particularly that play. For example, Hamlet rewrites that letter so that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern go off to England and get killed by the King of England in his, Hamlet's, place. So he's sent them to their death. But there's no mention in the play that they knew about the plot against Hamlet, or that Hamlet thought they knew, that they confessed to him, or he suspected it, or anything. It just happens that he sends them off to their death. In Twelfth Night, Viola lands on this island, and of course there's the whole plot about her with Olivier and Feste and Malvolio and everything. But she's been shipwrecked, and she could perfectly easily have got a boat because of her family's fame. It would have been paid for afterwards easily, and she could have gone back home. And if she stays on the island because she thinks her brothers possibly survived, well, why doesn't she talk about that? Well, because that's not what Shakespeare's writing about. But the fact remains there are questions like this which aren't explained in the plays. That's my point.